On the 22nd of November, 1642, Abel Tasman, 3 months out from Java, in search of new trade routes, remarked in his journal, "We found our compasses were not steady as they should be, and we suppose there might be a lodestone about here." 2 days later, in the sunny afternoon, a sailor saw high land to the northeast. That land was the high peaks of what, in 1798, Basson Flinders named after Tasman's ships, Mount Heemskirk and Mount Zeehan. The pioneers followed 2.5 centuries later to prove that Tasman's supposition of mineral wealth was true, for Heemskirk yielded tin and Zeehan silver. Machinery, abandoned shafts and adders. As you drive through some of Tasmania's most hostile but strikingly beautiful country, you can't help but wonder at the hardships the pioneers had to endure. There's no town more typical of Tasmania's Wild West mining era than Zeehan, and this is Zeehan's story. Zeehan was discovered by Frank Long on December the 8th, 1882, when he pegged out this first section of the Zeehan field. Ironically, Long was to die a poor man, for 16 years later, when Zeehan was a town of 8,000 people, he was sleeping on the bags, on the floor of an engine room, on the very lease he first pegged.
Yes, he was a legend in the days when I was teaching. He was such a legend that any mining that was concerned with Zeehan or the West Coast would come through him.
Reward for finding the silver lead and establishing the Zeehan field was £1 a week pension, from government pension.
What was Zeehan like in the early years when some of the mines were still operated?
Well, it was a jolly good place.
It was the boom town of Tasmania. It was the 3rd largest town in Tasmania.
Father used to tell me that he was the miner here, that there were 36, I should say, mines operating at the one time. At lunch time and change of shift, 36 whistles blew in and around the immediate district.
They found that this was a great town. They had nothing to use like they have today. They didn't have the equipment.
I suppose it was rough and tumble in those days too?
Oh, yes, quite.
Oh, well, what do you call rough and tumble? It was considered to be fairly up to date most times. But, not much by present day standards, of course. There was very few houses had a laundry or a wash house, and the toilets was the far end of the block, 2.5 chains from the back doors. Ooh.
A bit of a streak of a cold morning then, wouldn't it?
Well, the pubs in the town were a thing that was a part of the town. You see, when we were first married, I used to be so frightened when my husband wouldn't turn up of a night. I was frightened. And I'd think, well, something's happened to him. I'll ring up the police. I'll ring up the hospitals. So I did. And his mother lived close by, and she'd say, "Oh, don't worry, Marjorie. He'll be all right, you know." Probably kept a little bit late for work, and I didn't realise till years later that, of course, he went to the pub every night.
The men, I suppose, cut up a bit rough now and again after a few drinks?
Oh, I think they do
anywhere.
Anywhere and any time. They do now.
Sure.
I don't think they're much different, really. The only difference was that there were so many of the men camped out of town, woodcutters and others, and they came into town, and the hotel was the only place to go, and if they had a day off, they stayed in there too long. Where now they mostly go home or with some other attraction.
I can remember there's about 12 or 13-year-old kid, my father and another chap, he used to go over the hospital cutting wood, and that wasn't too far away. Like in them days, it was a cross-cut saw, and it was pretty hot work, and he'd take a billy of tea, and it wouldn't be too long before the tea would be gone, and Dad would give me and my brother Andrew a bob or a shilling, and he'd send us over to Mrs. Trippett's to get the billy filled up with beer. And that billy of beer, we'd get a big billy about that high, filled for a shilling.
Haven't times changed? What caused the mines to close?
Two factors involved in the collapse of the field. And the first one was that most of the ore bodies were very rich, but in isolated pockets. And when you come to the end of the rich ore, there's little else left. And the second, of course, is the metal market prices collapsed, and they couldn't get anything for the mineral anyway.
Where's most of the workforce employed?
At Renison. It is a one mine town, really. I think there's only about 12 or 15 Zeehan people working in mines who work at Rosebery, EZ Company.
Now, what about your hope for Zeehan in the future?
Well, I'd say that Zeehan's looking up. I'd say that it's got a greater potentiality than it ever had in my day.
You know, it's good to have lived to see Zeehan come back again.
Oh, I'd hope to see it grow and prosper, but to be frank, I can't see it being very much bigger than it is.
Once you've lived in the West Coast, it's hard to give up.
Of course, in those days there was plenty of money about. So, in 1889, the Bank of Van Diemen's Land opened its doors for business.
Closed 2 years later in 1891.
Any reasons for this at all, like the closure?
As far as we can tell, it was from advancing funds against speculative mining stock.
Ah, not a bad reason. Mike, this is one of the older buildings in Zeehan. Could you tell me something about it? When was it built?
Built in 1902. Solid brick, beautiful ceiling work, magnificent blackwood staircase in the residence part.
Beautiful. How long has the bank been in operation in Zeehan? ANZ Bank?
Since 1897.
Has it?
Yes. It's been operating continuously in one form or another through its various forebears since then. Commercial Bank of Tasmania, Union Bank, ES&A.
Were there anything in the way of robberies at all?
Ooh, none that I've heard of. I'm sure they thought about it from time to time.
I reckon they would too. And still, you never know, do you?
Well, there's always a possibility, isn't it?
Excuse me, please, I have company money.
I'm not here, right?
You talk to me, will you? I've just walked the bloody bank. Well, bugger me, they've stolen me horse.
Oh, then, Paddy, we'll have the money.
Oh, well, I was only for an officer.
Well, here we go.
In those boom years from the late 1880s, when ore was found in such vast quantities, it was thought that Zeehan was another Broken Hill. Buildings sprang up. People were here to stay. Well, perhaps not all of them, but some of their buildings did. Zeehan boasted 26 pubs. It seems they needed something stronger to drink than water. And, struth, there was plenty of that. Anyway, this pub here in the central still remains, along with the post office, St Luke's Church, the Gaiety Theatre where Dame Nellie Melba once performed, and the School of Mines, now the West Coast Pioneers Memorial Museum.
The School of Mines became a museum in 1960 after consultation between a few of old Zeehanites in 1957 when it was then just a technical school at night.
There's several very interesting models I noticed. There's an old battery on display there.
That was a model of the batteries that were around in the early 1900s.
All these old papers and so on. Now, where did they come from?
Donations. Every one of them has been donated by kind people over the years, and we're getting quite a collection now.
Still coming in?
Yes, still coming in. Yes. Matter of fact, I've got some in the office right now that have only just arrived, and one includes one of the first volume of the first paper printed here. We get a lot of machinery given to us from the mining companies here.
I notice there's a kiosk out the back.
Well, we've only had that about 6 years, and that was put there for the convenience of tourists who wanted cups of tea and coffee and something to eat on the road.
And what about this mineral collection? It's tremendous.
Well, this belonged to the School of Mines. It's the original collection. When this closed down in 1960, there was some talk that the Hobart Museum wanted it, the Launceston Museum, and a few other things, but we held out and got it for our museum, which was then operating in the 2 front rooms.
Now this little fellow's caught my eye. Beautiful.
Oh, well, this stuff is crocite, and it's composed of lead chromate, which is formed from serpentine in this vicinity.
Mike, what would a chunk like that be worth?
Well, I would perhaps charge $3 or $4 for a piece here, but if it must be transported elsewhere, well, it becomes much more expensive.
Does it have any other value than just as a collector's item?
No, it is only a collector's item.
It's an old mine from the boom years, Mike.
Yes, it was an old flux mine in the boom days, and the dirt was carved out here just to put in the smelters.
I noticed you said flux mine. What does that mean?
It means it wasn't carted out for its actual lead content. It was needed in the process of extracting lead from the other ores.
And the track we drove along a moment ago, that was once an old railway. Is that correct?
Yes, that was an old 2-foot gauge tram line, and it was used chiefly to cart the ore and supplies from these mines.
All aboard. Over 360 kilometres of track made up a network of railways that snaked its way through the valleys of the west coast, providing a link between most of the boom towns and the ports of Burnie and Strawn. As many as 8 railways were in operation. Now one remains, the Emu Bay Railway Company, the only rail link the west coast has with the port of Burnie. One of those old links, the Zeehan Ringville Mountain Railway, close for about 50 years now, past one of the most magnificent waterfalls in Tasmania, the Montezuma Falls. Well, I never go anywhere without the lucky charm. It's been about a bit, and here she goes again. Launceston, this is Bravo Alpha Charlie, taxiing Zeehan for a local flight, departing runway 36. The Montezuma Falls, magnificent. In addition to the falls, there are plenty of attractions within a few kilometres of Zeehan to interest the visitor, including the old Montana mine. Tasmanian Smelting Company smelters, where ore from the mines was treated before being railed to Strawn and shipped to England. And they've even got a ghost town, Dundas.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so free. Flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be? Believe it or not, it's just me. This is too good to be true. Look at me.
You know, you wouldn't think so, but tourism has been around for a long time. Let me quote from a Western Tasmanian Tourism Association item, written by H.W. Judd. No one who has viewed the scenic beauties of the district can fail to be charmed and wish to return to them again. Majestic mountains, rocky gorges, luxuriant fern gullies, magnificent rivers, and interesting button grass plains vary the landscape and provide a veritable feast to the eye of the visitor. 74 years since this was written, the only thing to change is the value of the scenery.
I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so free. Flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be? Believe it or not, it's just believe it or not. I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so free. Flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
Back in the 1820s, when the penal settlement on Sarah Island in Macquarie Harbour was still going, the convicts were sent out each day to cut yew and pine on the banks of the Gordon River.
Well, come on, Cliff. I think we'll get ashore and have a cuppa.
What's those rocks is that? They're bloody slim.
Right. When the penal settlement closed, a bunch of hardy old pioneers settled on other western rivers and continued cutting the pine. They were nicknamed the Piners. Today they're still cutting the hue and pine, and a couple of hardy west coasters, Cliff Blacklow and his brother Lyndon, are modern-day piners. That's not a bad brew. Well, Cliff, how do you get the hue and pine trees out?
Well, the hardest part of it, Bert, is to find the bloody things, really. You've got to wander through the scrub in all types of weather. They grow in the most unusual places, sometimes right on the edge of the rivers, other times like this, 100 foot off the water, and back right into the myrtle and the hardwood. We've got a little portable winch that we made with the help of a friend in Zeehan, Mr. Eric Howe. He designed it and built it. Pulls itself about through the scrub. We fall the pine and then we make a chute at the steepest part we can find so they'll slide easy. Pull them all to the chute, measure them, round them, put a number on them and write it in the book. And we send them into the river, jump in the boat and raft them up, wait till there's enough water, tie the boat onto the raft and go with it to Corinna.
How far would that be, if I may ask?
Let me think, about 25 miles from here by the river. When they arrive at Corinna, they hook onto them with a four-wheel drive and pull them out of the water and cut them up at the mill that's down there.
Cliff, how old would some of these trees be?
Well, the CSIRO have done a survey in the top end of the Stanley River recently, and they've proved to 5,000 years old in that area, and they seem quite confident that they can find some there that's 7,000 years old. So she's a very old timber, isn't she?
Remarkable.
Yeah. There's a lot of pine that's been felled for years, got big myrtles growing out of it, celery, a lot of moss on it, and it's terribly waterlogged. You have a look at him and you think, well, will he float or won't he? So if he's a good log, well, take the chance on him. But now that the dam's well underway, we have to get all the pine out before they flood it, which we will. That includes everything that'll float, including the big downers if we can get them to float. If we're lucky enough to catch them at the bottom, before they sink completely. We can tie them onto the raft and the buoyancy of the other logs will float them, or partially float them, so we don't lose them all, but we lose a hell of a percent of those type of logs, yeah. It's used for a hell of a lot of uses. Boat building, you know, one of the best timbers in the world for that.
So I believe.
Cabinet making, furniture, everything, anything you can mention that timber's used for, well, Zeehan Pine's the best for it as far as I'm concerned.
Nothing like letting your hair down at the local football club, the Zeehan Football Club. Here's one of me poems. 'Tis with gravel ovals and bloody rain the West Coasters have to cope. Strike me pink, it's horses they ride, not round a track, but over granite hills to the coast and back. We won't be tearing out there like the old pioneers used to. I'll just take my time and saunter along and catch up with you somewhere along the line. That's a long ride. Wouldn't like to try it too often. This is Trial Harbour, once the port for Zeehan. It was described by the miners as a miserable apology for port. It's little wonder that the vessel this port was named after found it out there. Trial Harbour. Trial and bloody error.
Well, Trial Harbour today is mainly used as a weekend getaway for the local people of Zeehan. There's a lot of them down here that have their own shacks. I think there must be about 30 shacks down here now. And for fishing, people do a lot of fishing. Kids love the beach, of course. They get crave from time to time. We even get a lot of people from up the coast come down just to come out to trial. But the locals, the ones that own horses, often use a trail ride to trial as a training run for the horses and exercise for themselves.
What about boating? They wouldn't do much boating in the area, would they?
It can be dangerous, actually. Even we have had even local lives lost out here at Trial Harbour through the dangers of the sea.
Best left alone.
Yeah, you've really got to know what you're doing.
Here in 1888, the bags of ore lay on the wharf awaiting shipment to German and Australian smelters. It was sent by pack horse and dray over the bleak granite hills which separate Zeehan and Trial Harbour. And it was the cost of transport and shipping that stole most of the profits of Zeehan's early exports. But that was only a minor setback. In 1914, when the mine started to fail, the decline of Zeehan began. The town, which had a population of 8,000 to 10,000 people, began to die. In 1960, when the Oceana mine closed, people thought that was the finish of Zeehan. But Zeehan has endured the winds of change.